Exciting talk from our first speaker of the afternoon, Glynn Davies. He is the Senior Collections and Learning Curator at Colchester Museum. We've just been to see his excellent exhibition on gladiators, which I recommend that you all go and see at some point. And this afternoon, he is going to be talking to us about new research into Colchester Museums' Roman archaeology collections. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, firstly, thanks to Pete for inviting me here in the REMADE project, I suppose, for firstly involving Colchester Museums in the REMADE project, and obviously giving me 15 minutes today in which I'm going to touch on metals. Okay, I've said it. There'll be some metals at the end, but I'm going to use my 15 minutes to plug the Colchester collections, really. And keep me on time, Pete. If it looks like I'm still rambling on, throw something at me because I'll keep going. So I want to sort of discuss, the amazing collections at Colchester. Now, the Colchester Archaeology Collection is designated by Arts Council England. It's really significant. You can probably all guess that. But I think there's been really little integrated research over many decades in some way. It's always going to the same monographs, etc., and reports that have been published, and they are very good. But of course, like any museum in this country, it has untold documented collections. You just wouldn't know about it because it's on an internal, normally, database. And if that database is live and open to the public, sometimes it's curtailed. So our own new fancy collections database, Axial Collections, we don't publish all our records. We have a minimum standard we want to publish to. So you're actually probably only looking at 20% of the collection. And often people say to me, I thought you had this. I go, yes, well, we do, but we don't publish that. So today I want to investigate this. Think about what Gail said this morning as I talk along and present some really interesting collaborative projects. And I suppose the thread running through this is collaboration, and that's where I'm sort of connecting into REMADE today. I'm talking about reviewing. I'm talking about something I go on about and try and do for many, many years now, which is this excavation of the archive, the excavation of the museum's Gail used the word antiquarian collections earlier. That's the word we use a lot, or historic collections. So these are always much earlier, and they underpin normally many, many museums throughout this country. And they are documented to different degrees. I want to really run through a big project called Decoding the Dead. I want to run through a project called Gladiators of Camulodunum, and another project called Veneer of Empires. Loads of other things I could talk about, but I thought these were interesting and had a common thread. And I'm going to end, I'll just show you some pretty pictures of metals if I run out of time. So Decoding the Dead. So this was a 12-month research project that was funded by ACE. Because we have an ACE designated collection at the time, we could apply for the Destination Development Fund. This is really important. I think someone always say to universities and academics, museums are able to open up pots of money that are not available to you. Half the time, though, we need a good project. So in terms of this, I work with Professor Hella Eckhart here at Reading, and it very much was a collaboration. We worked together to try and unlock some money, and the council match funded this to 100k. Now, for what we got out of that project, this was great value for money. Sometimes people go, oh, that's a lot of money. And I go, well, not a lot really, and we did an awful lot. Bearing in mind, it can cost up to £2,000, Gail and Angie, to undertake one research inquiry. And we got a lot out of this. As I say, it's a collaboration with the University of Reading, with huge support and input from others, including Durham University and external specialists, all of whom were paid out of the project. So Nina Crummy undertook a massive reassessment of artefacts in the collection that you wouldn't be able to access. They are published in a very, very early volume. Our human osteologist, who's a specialist in cremations, Dr. Emily Carroll, was paid. Our pottery specialist, Matt Loughton at the Colchester Archaeological Trust, was paid. We were paying for all, as they should be, all this input to undertake this project, which had an amazing exhibition. It won an SMA award. Thank you very much, Gail, and everyone who assessed that, in terms of how we communicated the work we did and the science we were doing to these Roman cremations. History Hit, you may have heard of them, did an online podcast and film. The podcast had over 100,000 listeners, and I had people from Australia getting in touch with me going, oh, do you remember me? I've just heard you in my ears. So this is an amazing bit of public archaeology, touching on multiple different platforms, if you like. We had a future learn course, again, part funded through this that the University of Reading produced, and you can still access it for free, a 2-week course. Had a really high retention rate, one of their best retention rates for a course. And there is an academic paper in prep. Heather and I have just been speaking to Durham in our lunchtime to try and get this on the road. So all the learning and the research we've done will come out of this, which was a reassessment of Roman cremated remains with their original vessels in the museum's collection that no one really knows about because they've never been assessed before. They've never been looked at. For those of you not familiar with Colchester, here it is. Here's Camalodunum, later Colchester. Little picture. We'll be touching on the Temple of Claudius later. We were looking at Britain at the time after the Roman conquest, where, Colchester should be a melting pot. And previous assessment, and especially isotope analysis, which was picked up earlier by Alex as one of these scientific methods, has focused on inhumation burials. But as most people know, cremation is the predominant burial rite in the Iron Age and into the early Roman period. So we're getting a massive bias in the data. That's not to say people weren't inhumed in the early period, but that's the preferred rite. And at the moment, no one is sort of doing this work on cremations. They are still sort of a very specialist thing in many ways. And there is just so many things you can do with burnt bone now. It's really, really interesting. And through isotope analysis, you can start to determine where these people, these individuals may be from. So some of you may know this or not. Isotope analysis had never been undertaken on Roman cremated remains. So yes, on non-Roman, other period cremated remains, but no one had done this for Roman cremations, at least in Britain. I don't know elsewhere. But by now, they certainly have done more. And I know there's massive projects out there and huge projects being funded elsewhere, especially in Europe, looking at this and covering the Roman period. But it was the first to look at this. And it's the fact that we can analyze essentially one of the migration isotopes, that's strontium. So the oxygen, as you can probably guess, has literally been burnt out of the bone. So you're left with the strontium. Essentially, we're looking at the early life of individuals where this strontium's leaching in, and you're getting the isotope, that chemical signature that we're looking for in that bone. And then we're analysing that and looking at where people can be from, where the matching underlying geology matches that signature, I suppose. Now, what's interesting about this is that you really do need another isotope to help pinpoint. And so we are at the moment looking at the lead isotope, and looking over to Hella. There's sort of, the scientists don't agree. Can they do it? Can't they do it? Again, it's a bit tricky, but hopefully this will sort of pin down some of these individuals a little bit more. But what I can say is that non-locals are definitely incomers, and we certainly had some non-locals in our study numbers, although locals may not be. And you can sort of see a few marrying up with the underlying strontium levels here or not. And we have this lovely famous burial, the Mersey burial. If you've heard of this before, this is where they found it was frankincense. It was analysed previously by Ria Brettel and other academics. So a really interesting burial, and one that was on our list to assess. So we studied 32 cremations, 22, you do need the petrous portion of the bone surviving. We've got these amazing ossuaries in the collection, only about 40 to 50 of these across the country. You get some early ones, but ours are late Roman. And we were sort of assessing, Hella's methodology, look at the grave goods, the burial assemblage, who do we think this is? And then does the science marry up? So sometimes we'd look at the burial goods and we go, right, this would essentially mean an incomer. We would assume this is an incomer. What does the science tell us? No, it's actually telling us something quite different, that they're local. This is really interesting, especially for the early cremations. If you're an incomer, or well, I suppose you're local and you're trying to look Roman. So it feeds into this idea of identity in death, I suppose. Or I suppose the identity of others who are burying you, since the dead don't bury themselves. Other times, lovely face spots that people tend to associate with the military. They're really lovely. We have a huge collection of Roman Colchester. I'm sure it's the largest in the country, and needs a lot more work done to it. We would say they should be an incomer, really. And yes, they were an incomer. So this individual, this chap here, possibly from northern Italy or Greece. And then we have very, very local looking things. And are they local? And they turned out to be local. So in a way, you know, I don't know what this tells you. I don't know what it tells you when the sample is so small with 32, but then this is pioneering stuff. And equally, we're using the antiquarian collection. So what you need to do is start building. More people need to do this, and then we need to integrate this data with, you know, commercial archaeology and development happening today and archaeology happening today, where you have context. So we're looking at the moment to try and fund a PhD to cover all the rest of the cremations in the historic collection at Colchester and bring in modern cremations that have been excavated by CAT, namely, and other archaeological units in the area, and balance this out. But it was a great pilot study. Fantastic bit of public archaeology, really, in the ways we put this together. You know, the public really have limited ideas of what you can do with the science. We're talking about some really technical stuff today. People didn't know that you can sex a cremation, that large enough bits of bone survive that you can look at pathology, etc., which, you know, maybe most of us would understand that a cremation holds that value. So even simple things like that. So then when you got onto isotope analysis, and again, we had some lovely graphs, but as Gail said earlier, we didn't put those graphs on the wall in our exhibition because it was a step too far. But being able to communicate this science in a digestible way, really, really important. And I think we hit the mark. And again, this wouldn't have happened without collaboration, true collaboration. Hella and I working together to achieve something we both wanted, the museum service and Hella and the university, as well as that external funding, because we don't have time just to do this. A part of that 100K, as you all know, staff salaries are very high. So up to 30K was to have a dedicated project officer. I don't have time, you know, I'm not a Roman curator. I curate social history, art, horology, taxidermy, natural science, all of this with a very, very small team. So as much as I want to do this, we got someone in, and Dr. Carolina Rangel de Lima is the one who did a fantastic job. So you need that external money, and you need people to help you formulate sometimes those research projects that you want to achieve. So going to rattle through gladiators at Camulodunum. I don't know if you've all heard of the Colchester vase, been in the press a little bit. It's very exciting. I was quoted, I think, saying, "This is astonishing." And then on Twitter, everyone punched down on me. I went, "How dare you say that's astonishing?" But I can tell you, I was astonished when we found this new evidence. So, you know, fingers up to them. Now, the last project was fully funded. This project was not funded. This project relied on generating a network over many years when I could ask specialists like Nina Crummy, like Dr. John Pearce at KCL, like Joanna Bird, who is a ceramic specialist, just to do this for free. And that's not where I started, but they gave their time to this. So this is a very, very different approach, and it's been going on for years, and they've put a lot of their energy into a really interesting project. So Colchester vase, arguably the most famous depiction of gladiators from Britain. Joanna Bird says it's the best made pot from Britain, and we've dug up a lot of pots. But, you know, if you want to have an argument about that, go and see her. But it is amazing. It's the privilege of being curator and being able to handle this and seeing others where you suddenly go, this pot is phenomenal. The fluidity of the characters, how they're moving around the vase. This doesn't really do it justice on this screen, this static image. It's a beautiful thing. And people often remark on it, so it's a little buff ware flagon and it's Samian dish and it's mortarium. But even here you see curation and thought. That mortarium fits that lid almost perfectly. They found that lid to fit in an exceptional way. So, and I just love the sort of the difference there, this burial assemblage. So it's a really big beaker, essentially is what it is. Although, you know, I don't know if ceramic people think about this all a lot. You know, it's defined as a beaker, but that's not the same as drinking out of a beaker. This is, I called it a supersized beaker. It's performing something quite different. And it's found as part of a burial assemblage. And what's important to say about the vase is that it was not made to be a cremation vessel. You do not get decorated barbotine vessels as cremation vessels. We could only find one other example. So this never started life to be a cremation vessel. It had a biography before that. So just bear that in mind. I've put here, this is a lot of other people's research. So I want to acknowledge them. I'll give you again an overview of Colchester and put it into context if you don't know. Big pottery industry at Colchester. It's one of only 2 places known to be manufacturing proper Samian ware in Britain. Loads of types of fabrics. You get specialist wares like Samian, colour-coded wares, etc. But the distribution is quite limited if you compare it to, say, the Nîmes Valley. The vase was thought to be a German product for some time. It you know, stylistically looked like it could be. And of course, I'll come on to the inscription where the 30th Legion is mentioned, the elephant in the room for the vase, because the 30th Legion was never stationed in Britain. They're stationed in the latter period in the Rhineland, near Xanten. But we confirmed something that Rex Hull had already said, which is this is a Colchester product. So that, ironically, not far from where it was buried, it was made in the Western Kilns to Colchester outside the town, but it is a Colchester product. The inscription. So this is the clincher. This is the thing where I was surprised and told off on Twitter for being surprised. It's got this amazing inscription that has always been assumed to be cut after firing. So this is a lovely gladiator pot. Someone's seen it and gone, oh, I saw these games and I'm going to record what's on there, which is I saw Secundus and Mario, the bestiarii, fighting this bear. And then I saw Memnon, the secutor. He'd already won 9 fights. And undoubtedly, that's what helped him defeat Valentinus, the Retiarius, who on the pot has dropped his trident. He's been defeated, and we assume he is a tyro, that he's an untested gladiator, and he has come all the way. He is in some way connected to the 30th Legion. There's that lovely inscription. And if you look at it really close, and I show you an example of an inscription after firing, where you just damage the slip. If you try and scratch, etch, whatever you're trying to do to that slip, it pings and it shatters. And you can't achieve what has been achieved below, which on high magnification, you can see the superimposition of strokes. Those X's can't be etched on. They have to be drawn through wet clay. So at a certain stage, the chain of operation here, this inscription has been applied. It's pre-firing. So this means it's part of the object's conceptualization. This is a commissioned piece. Someone has made this, and this completely changes the look of the vase. It's not made as a cremation vessel. It's made as a trophy. It's not handed around during a banquet in a sort of convivial context, because there is no use wear. There is barely any damage to it. This is an almost pristine pot. Nina Crummy pointed this out to me. I was like, oh yeah, it's not broken. I don't know why, as an archaeologist, this was news to me, but it's almost pristine. So this is a trophy. And what it really means is that this is the first depiction of a real gladiatorial event, and that these people were real. Secundus and Mario were real, as were Valentinus, etc. That they lived, maybe died in Colchester. I'll escape the elephant in the room of where's the amphitheatre. This is being published in Britannia as 2 separate papers, and it's got past peer review now. And we argue, there's not one way of putting on gladiator shows, and there's a lot of different entertainment venues and ways that gladiators could perform. And yes, it may not have happened in Colchester, but that's our best bet. But there's an intimate connection with whoever was buried in this pot, and why they had it commissioned, and probably then were buried in it if they're one and the same person. How we square the 30th Legion? Well, John's work really sort of suggests that actually look at Valentinus and the Legion as a nodal role. And if you look at the Rhineland, you look at all the inscriptions of how the military are involved in bear catching, animals for the arena. This is just part of an amazing network we're starting to scrape the surface of. So this is what I was amazed by when I sat there with Nina, with John, and we looked at this inscription and we went, wow, that's not post-firing, it's pre-firing. I think having been on display for 170 years, it had a quick trip to London at the request of Sir Mortimer Wheeler, then back to the Colchester Museum, that this has always gone unnoticed. And it's what I love about museum collections, where you can take a single object and you just throw enough specialists at it and enough people who know a lot more than me, and you extract all you can, and you can create a new narrative. Okay, and how am I doing for time, Pete? I'm going to rattle through. Yeah, speed it up. Okay, a veneer of empire. So again, I'm going to zoom through. So working with Dr. Penny Coombe, who is a specialist in marble, stone, architectural stone, etc., making, working, all of that, the economics of it. We are looking at another kind of archive that has been published. People sort of know of it, and it's never really been looked at, which is the Kent Blackstall site in Colchester, south of the Temple. So Dr. Kevin Hayward, who's a petrologist and is associated with Reading, worked on this too, and he said it is the best collection of Roman marble from anywhere in Britain. It has every single marble type you can think of. He's made a reference. We got money from the Roman Society, so again funded, supported by Hella. Penny coming in and looking at, can we do a small project? And so we have catalogued, with the help of Reading students, we've got Dara here today and others, we've catalogued 1,700 pieces of marble. We are looking at different things, as people have been interested in the colour, what these stones are, etc. But they've not been looking at their manufacture. They've not been looking at the fact that this isn't all veneer. It was thought that this assemblage would have adorned the Temple of Claudius, but reassessment by Paul Drury has made clear that actually it's a much later assemblage. And actually what we're looking at here is probably marble from across the town. It's not one assemblage that's fallen down. There are all sorts, as you saw from those mouldings there and pieces. It's amazing. It has been collected from across the town, and we shouldn't think of places like London and Colchester as Rome upon Thames or Rome upon the Colne. But I do wonder, actually, a study like this starts to change your idea visually of what Colchester looked like. And maybe it was a bit of a flavour of Rome upon Colne, you know, maybe something more is going on there. So this is a project in progress and Penny's working on it. Hopefully we can get it to some sort of postdoc where we want to do a lot more. And I'm going to finish, because I've probably run out of time. Here are some nice metal objects that we hope to explore and extract more meaning from: the Godspecs Mercury, the Lexton site in, the Sheepen site, sorry, where we have all this militaria being reworked and refashioned and refitted, if you like. We have individual objects like the ossuaria, and then we have things like the assemblage group of the Lexton tumulus, where the little boar is from. These amazing objects in a late Iron Age burial that are clearly coming from the continent or elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Interesting to see all the stories that you can bring out from the collections that have been in the basement of the museum for 150 years. So fantastic. Does anyone have any questions for Glynn? What's your next project?
I have got loads. Jet, I really want to get something on Roman jet off the ground, because everyone thinks it's coming from Yorkshire, and London and Colchester have documented but not published collections, and I think you'll find something really interesting. I think you'll find something really interesting about craftspeople being itinerant, and maybe German workers coming over to Britain, maybe working with Yorkshire Jet in different ways. I think that would be a great project, but it's one in the pipeline, maybe, Helen.
Have you ever considered publishing your data on an open data platform which does not require a museum basic minimum standard? Because that is the most accessible way of people being able to download and reimagine huge amounts of information without you determining what they can see or read.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. I suppose it's a question around the data we do have. How dirty is it? So how accurate is it? But I worry if people don't then investigate that, on which we can spend time doing. We're curators. They can come to us and go, you've got this stuff. Is that true? And we go, oh, sorry, it's been wrongly categorized. Recently, someone on Twitter, that's not Samian ware form. I went, no, it suffered the fate of it looks red and shiny. It's not Samian ware. They can question us, but I worry about people not questioning almost. And it's the level of data in some of those records. When I say it's documented, it is documented, but it's an accession number and pot, Roman, maybe. But you're right, maybe that's the way to do it, is to be fully transparent, go, here it is, make of it what you will, and we can stand there and assist the public how they wish.